Daarom wil ik graag beginnen met het webinar. Mijn naam is wederom Alex Coupeers van Gripper Procurement. Gripper Procurement is gespecialiseerd in het digitaliseren en optimaliseren van inkoopsprocessen. Ons slogan is Procurement Made Digital. En we vinden eigenlijk dat door het automatiseren van vooral de operationele inkoopprocessen het vakgebied van inkoop niet alleen leuker en interessanter wordt, maar ook een stuk efficiënter. En daarom willen we graag deze e-procurement kennis met jullie delen en hebben we GreenStone Plus gevraagd om hun innovatieve contract- en leveranciersmanagement software te introduceren. Het webinar zal worden gepresenteerd door Giles Scott Hayward en hij zal jullie de komende 30 minuten meenemen in de wereld van digitizing supplier contracts, capturing supplier data and documents, managing risk and compliance. Oftewel in één innovatieve omgeving je contractmanagement en leveranciersmanagement volledig gemakkelijk kunnen organiseren. Giles, I will give the word to you now. Could you take over, please?
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Alex. And thank you and good morning to everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We're going to keep it fairly brief for you, no longer than 20-25 minutes. And as planned, we will be taking you through our supplier portal solution and showing you how you can start to manage multiple supplier management processes online. This will focus on contract management, overarching supplier management methods, and of course include some reference to GDPR. We will not be doing a Q&A during the call, but should you have any questions, then please do enter them in the box provided. There should be a question box on your webinar panel, so please feel free to enter any questions that you have in there and we can respond directly to you after the webinar. So just very quickly on GreenStone, we are a specialist responsible business and responsible sourcing solutions company. Deployed in actually over 100 countries and enable commercial and public sector organizations to measure, manage and report on all their non-financial information. So we have a number of different solutions. Today, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at our supplier portal solution, which is focused particularly on managing your supply chain more responsibly, more effectively and hopefully more efficiently. So, what we've seen in the market is an increasing focus on the supply chain. And I suspect you have as well, at least I hope you have. There's been a shift in focus from managing and reporting on your own company towards a need to take responsibility for not just the bottom line, but I'm sure you've heard it many times before, the triple bottom line of your business or organization. So this means the social, the environmental, and the financial. The result of this over time has been to expect organizations to take more responsibility for who they do business with, i.e. their supply chain. Therefore, there's far more scrutiny on the associated due diligence and supply management practices than ever there has been previously. For example, if we look at two of the bubbles on this diagram here, stakeholders and legislation and framework, we can see there are far more people interested in what you are doing in this area, be it investors, customers, consumers, or even the shareholders. And there is far more driving organizations to report and be diligent. For example, we have GDPR where you're jointly liable for the actions of your suppliers, but other frameworks and legislation as well, such as the Modern Slavery Act in the UK, or framework reporting such as GRI and the Sustainable Development Goals. From a procurement perspective, this means that within many businesses, this function cannot operate in the same manner as it has done previously. Historically, this area of the business was perhaps a little isolated from others, maybe focusing on cost saving and service delivery of suppliers. However, it is the outward facing part of an organization. And so with the advent of these sustainable procurement and responsible sourcing roles, procurement is now connecting organizations to their supply chains in ways that were probably not even imagined 20 years ago. So what I wanted to just get across in this slide is that there are many interlinking drivers and responsibility in sustainable supplier management. Whether it's managing compliance or addressing risk, There are many areas of the business involved in this, and it's becoming harder to manage without a more centralized approach. So our solution to this is Supplier Portal. Supplier Portal offers a comprehensive solution that brings together the different elements of supplier management into one system. We use a number of different functions that can be scaled at any time across the business. So hopefully the system offers a simplified solution to what can be a very complex issue of achieving confidence in your supply chain. And it's a fully customizable interface to ensure that the system supports your current processes and ongoing requirements. So I'll take you through each of these key thematic areas in what could be called a typical client use case of the software. Not all of these functions apply to all organizations, as every organization has different processes in some way. The idea, though, is to wrap Supplier Portal around your current methods and processes and enhance these over time. So one of the best ways to both understand and rationalize your supply chain is to have visibility of all of your contracts and to manage them effectively and efficiently. Supplier Portal ensures that you can have all of your contracts in one central database, accessible by all relevant users. This is particularly relevant at a time when many organizations are adding contract addendums regarding clauses around GDPR, for example. So these contracts can be uploaded in bulk with supporting details recorded and searchable at any time. So the system should enable you to track spend against your contracts as well as convert from any currency to your standard currency. So I'll just take you through the contract process in a little more detail. We have the contract record creation here. This process starts with the creation of a contract record, where organizations can include their own categorization, risk rating, and contract clauses, along with value information, users, and key dates. And all of this information is accessible at any time. Once you have that contract record in place, you can have multiple records per supplier, of course, but you can also have multiple files per record. And this, for example, could be draft and signed contracts, contract management plans, or indeed, as we mentioned before, addendums such as GDPR clauses. Next, you can determine the access rights. So each contract record can be assigned access rights in order to ensure security around your contract. These can be assigned on a read or write access basis to individuals or indeed groups, such as departments within your organization. And finally, you can set up notifications for individual users for a specific contract. These can be set for any time prior to the start of the contract notice period or the termination date of a particular contract. So the aim of this is to ensure that you centralize the database of contracts and that you can manage them across all of your users more efficiently. Having a full understanding, though, and complete visibility of your contracts ensures that this is a good starting point to begin to have a clearer picture of exactly who you are doing business with, which in turn then enables you to engage in a relevant manner with appropriate suppliers. So as you begin to engage for different reasons with your suppliers, we have compliance dashboards that enable you to track this engagement over time. And this might be through the period of a project or throughout the annual reporting period of an organization. One of the key ways of engaging your suppliers is to request information from them. This is done in Supplier Portal through assessment questionnaires, with organizations able to distribute accurately the relevant questionnaires to the appropriate suppliers. Therefore, suppliers are only responding to questionnaires that are relevant to them and appropriate to their business. And then within the question set, they're only replying to relevant questions as well, which is driven by something called conditional questions. So we utilize at GreenStone best practice content, which we manage ourselves, and it is informed by global standards, frameworks, and legislation. These best practice questionnaires cover anti-bribery and corruption, commercial information such as insurances, environment, GDPR, health and safety, information and IT security, and finally labour, which includes things like modern slavery, working conditions, freedom of association, and so on. However, as we mentioned at the start, the system is fully customizable, and organisations can include whichever question sets are required by them and gather all relevant evidence documents. So these could be bespoke IT security questionnaires, or they could be question sets that you've developed over time that relate specifically to your sector. The evidence documents that we mentioned there, gathered through the questionnaires, are also always available through the individual supplier profiles. So you can always access these documents for download at any time. And then the natural progression from engaging your suppliers and gathering relevant information is to use that information to ensure or manage supply chain compliance. So Supplier Portal has a number of tools which I'll show you, which enable you to maintain and monitor this compliance. At the highest level, you can view the completion rates of all questionnaires and contact those suppliers who are outstanding or are yet to respond to any question sets. And this dashboard also displays any risk flags that have been raised. And these risk flags are one method of accessing the data more efficiently. So the idea behind Supplier Portal is always that you can access data more quickly and more efficiently than you can previously do with offline or manual processes. So the logic behind a risk flag hopefully is evident in the name, but they can be placed on any question response in order to alert organizations to high-risk suppliers, with individual users choosing to be automatically alerted to this via email or just by coming in and viewing the dashboards. So a very easy way of determining a non-compliance or an exception to the rule that you would need to manage. Another key aspect of compliance is keeping up-to-date information, and this is a key aspect of Supplier Portal. The notification system that is built into the solution drives this on an ongoing basis. So it's always reminding suppliers to keep up-to-date information, to respond to any questionnaires that a buyer has added to the system. And whether this be insurance documentation or sector-specific legislation, anything that you have added into a bespoke questionnaire, the system will notify both you as a buyer and the suppliers to remind them to update this documentation. And of course, through the dashboards, you can interrogate this or view the status of all documentation in the system. So this leads me on to the questionnaire query. This is, you could call it a compliance tool or an analysis tool or a reporting tool. But as I mentioned, one of the main reasons to move to an online solution is in order to be able to use the information you have gathered more effectively. And I think this is what underpins online systems and centralized systems compared to what we would regard as possibly outdated methods and manual methods. This query function enables you to report on absolutely any metric or KPI within the tool, enabling you to measure your own organization's performance on key supply chain targets, as well as that of the compliance of your suppliers. So there's an example set of criteria here where we're querying across 3 different insurances and pulling back any suppliers that meet those queries, so don't have those insurances in place. But you can query on numerical fields, on expiry date information, or multiple question sets within the tools, which can inform, as I said, your annual reporting process and your reporting on progress against key performance indicators for your business. An extension of this and moving beyond compliance, there is the question of supplier performance. So Supplier Portal enables you to track your supplier performance relative to other defined groups of suppliers. This is done through the scorecard function, and multiple scorecards can be set up to create performance scores for any area for which you are gathering information. With weightings applied to individual question responses, these scorecards can then be applied to individual suppliers or groups of suppliers to create an overall performance score. And if you're scoring a group of suppliers, what you then get is a breakdown of the top performing and bottom performing suppliers within a certain group. As I mentioned, if you're doing an individual supplier like we're looking at here, you can see the comparative score or benchmark score relative to other categories of suppliers. And as a user, you can define those categories yourself. So another way, simple way of comparing suppliers, which I thought I'd just show you, is through the supplier comparison function. And this can relate or be relatable to procurement teams. This is a function that can be particularly useful when comparing suppliers that are part of a selection or tender process. So across the different areas where you're gathering information, you can see a tabular representation of the supplier responses across all of those areas, and that can be exported to Excel for different types of comparison if needs be, or combining with other data sets that you may have gathered during a tender process. Finally, one of the most important areas of a responsible supply chain is utilizing audits in some capacity. So organizations have different ways of approaching the audit process, and Supplier Portal hopefully can facilitate these current processes and enable the verification of data automatically in the system. So the way this audit process or audit facility works is either you can use a combination, but there's a built-in audit functionality which enables you to automatically verify any responses that have been entered into the system by a supplier and verify any documentation that has been uploaded by a supplier. And this is done through assigning bespoke sets of indicators. And we've got here pass, fail, caution, but you could have anything up to 10 or 12 different indicators and colors in the system and label them as you see fit. The system then automatically assigns that status and then aggregates that up or bubbles that up, to give you a total at the bottom of the audit. The auditor can manually review this documentation and record any comments, and if they're doing an on-site audit, they can attach files, maybe photographic evidence, to the audit report. So that's one method, that's the automated audit report in the system. Another way is to upload any offline reports in any file format such as PDF. So you may have current existing audit processes in place as an organization, and the idea, like with the contract, is that you're utilizing Supplier Portal to create a central database of this information. So you can upload those audits into the system and they can be time, date stamped by the auditor and given a status as well. So you'll have a record of any audits carried out within the system as well as any audits carried out outside the system. So the final way that you can use the audit function is an extension of the second method I talked of there. So if you do have a third-party auditor or are carrying out offline audits, these can be integrated into the system using a data feed. So there are different ways of doing that with an application program interface and API or by a file transfer process, but we can populate the system automatically with any data from third parties, and this includes third-party auditors. So I hope that gives you an idea of just another way of how you can verify and validate the information in the system whilst keeping a log of all the activity that's been carried out, all of the due diligence that's been carried out on the suppliers. So lastly, I just want to talk about the corrective actions in the system. This is almost a natural extension of the audit process and is where you can then manage the actions that arise from an audit report. These actions can be managed directly in Supplier Portal and populated either from external data feeds or from manual input forms launched from any screen in the portal. These corrective actions are assigned to suppliers and users, and then can be linked to particular documents or responses in the system. So the idea being that you can manage an action or a corrective action against the supplier from the creation of the action through to the conclusion or sign off of that action in the system. Like anything in the system, these actions run alongside automated notifications. So when you set up a deadline on an action for a supplier will be continually reminded at intervals that they need to act upon this action. In addition to that, you can also communicate directly with suppliers on the actions in the system, and they can communicate with your organization. So if they have any questions or require clarity on the action that's required, then they can communicate directly with you through the system. So I haven't been through absolutely every piece of functionality in the tool by any means, but I just wanted to give you a representative client journey from start to finish. And I thought we just draw that together with our 6 steps to successful online supplier management. And this really replicates or just concludes what we've been talking about today, and how you move to an online supplier solution. So, firstly, it's identifying, segmenting, and visualizing your suppliers. And if we didn't touch on that at the beginning, that's uploading all of your suppliers into the system and being able to categorize them in a way that's meaningful to your business and create that database which you can then search and begin to manage more efficiently. The first step of that, as we've suggested, would be to put all of your contracts in one place. You therefore understand who your active suppliers are, gives you an ability to rationalize your supply chain, who you're actually doing business with, and then which suppliers you would like to engage with. Third is integrating with internal and external systems. So we mentioned that Supplier Portal is, the ethos of it is that it should be able to wrap around and improve your current processes. And one aspect of that is bringing in information from third-party sources. Then we've got the focused distribution of supplier assessment questionnaires. As I mentioned, we can include any question sets that you require, or you can include or utilize the standard best practice questionnaires. The key here is that you can cover all of the information requirements and then distribute those questionnaires in a targeted manner, maybe based on geography, spend, service provision, or other key factors such as risk. And then fifth, automate processes to ensure the process is scalable. So this could be using external data feeds, this could be automating processes in the system, or just improving on manual processes that are currently in place, so that you're in a position to scale this up across your supply chain. And then the key thing is obviously utilizing the information. There's nothing worse than for suppliers, if they are providing assessment information, not to see that information being used proactively. And also from an internal perspective, if you're going to engage your organization and you're going to gather this information, be it from suppliers or across your own organization, then you really should be making use of the system to extract value from that information, and reporting against KPIs is a key area of that. So that's a brief introduction. I'd be happy to show anybody more at any point in time. And if you would like to understand a little bit more, then please do get in touch with either Alex or myself. And if you'd like the slides, we can share them with you. And as I said, if you have any questions at all, please pop them in the question box on hopefully your webinar panel, and we'll respond directly to you. So thank you very much again. That's everything from me. Alex, I don't know if you wanted to conclude in any way before we close the webinar.
Ja, een klein ding. Wat wij zullen doen is de opname van deze presentatie bij ons op de website zetten. En wij zullen een linkje naar jullie toesturen, zodat jullie dat eventueel in alle rust nog kunnen nakijken of luisteren. En ook wat eventueel wat andere informatie kunnen verzamelen. Ik wil jullie ook namens Schipper heel erg bedanken voor jullie aandacht. En ik hoop jullie binnenkort te spreken. That's it for me, Charles.
Thanks very much, Alex. Speak soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.